So the dream team for November, I've been working on it for a little while now. Been looking through a whole lot of stats to pick a dream team. It's honestly been hard work. The weekly one is usually pretty fun, and there's some obvious choices and a few guys to kind of narrow down. But over the whole of November, with various teams playing different levels of opposition, and some guys playing 2 games, some guys playing 4 games, some guys having one really fantastic game and then another quiet game. It's been a real hard slog to actually pick these guys, but I've settled on a team. I'll do subs as well with this one, because if I just did 15, I would end up doing about 5 minutes of honorable mentions. So I'm going to try and limit the honorable mentions, because otherwise, as I said, I'll be here a while. So I'll stick to 23 guys I thought did a pretty good job. Now, just keep in mind, this is not what I think is the best team. Like, I didn't just pick all the best players. I was trying to look at the guys who put in good performances in November. Like, one guy, for example, Breakout Player of the Year, Piwadyanti, has had a fantastic year. You don't get Breakout Player of the Year unless you've done something pretty solid. But in November, he was quiet. So he's not on here. Not because he's not a good player, but because, like, if I was picking a rugby championship team, you'd be looking at him because he had a solid shift. In November, not so much. So that's the thinking. So, yeah, there are some big names left out of here. And just looking at it, there's definitely more of a northern feel to this team than a southern one. But that just kind of is the way that some of the results went. I will start with a loose head prop. He's a southern man. Stephen Kitsoff from the Springboks. He's had a pretty long year. I should say I'm wearing Wales gear today for the first time, which is pretty sweet. There's a few Welsh guys on here, so that's why. I do not yet have a Wales hat, hence the Ulster hat. There is one particularly good Ulster player in this team. If you've guessed who it is. I'll be bringing up him later, but I figured the colours kind of match, is why I went with that combo. Yeah, so Kitsoff, becoming one of the best, if not, I'm not going to say who's the best, but he's definitely one of the best loose heads in world rugby at the minute. He's had a really good season since he came back to South Africa. He was averaging almost 6 tackles a game and only missing 0.5. So over the 4 games he played, I think he missed 2 tackles over 4 games and was making like 6 or 7 tackles a game. So very good work rate. Managed to get 2 turnovers for a prop, which is a pretty good thing. He had at least 6 carries a game, and his scrummaging was solid. So Stephen Kitsoff is Mr. Reliable. When the beast is fit, I'll be surprised if Kitsoff doesn't still start. But I guess we will see. Tight head, only one choice really here is Tyke Furlong from Ireland. He demolished people. He only played 2 games that I saw. I should also say that I'm kind of limiting this to mostly the games that I watched. I've included some stats of games that I didn't watch in full, but I haven't included any guys whose games I didn't kind of regularly sit down and watch. So the likes of Georgia. Sorry, I didn't watch enough. Did I watch any Georgian games this November? I don't think so. So yeah, just time limitations. So it's mostly all the tier 1 teams on here, I'm afraid. But if I get a bit more time to spend on these things in future, I'll have a look at that. Back to Tyke Furlong, getting distracted. 100% tackle rate. He doesn't make a whole bunch of tackles. He's not a massive tackler. I think it was like 4 or 5 a game, which is not that far from Kitsoff as well, which is similar. For a prop, it's still solid. But 100% doesn't miss, or at least in this November, didn't miss tackles over those 2 games that he played. He did, though, average 10 runs, so he knows what he's good at. Getting the ball in his hands and running over people who are significantly smaller than him. Suits him down to the ground. His scrummaging is almost second to none. He's made some pretty top scrummages look not that good. So he is he the best tight head in the world? Tell me one who's better. He's pretty darn good. Hooker. I've gone with a Frenchman. I've gone with Guillaume Guirado. France didn't have a very successful November, but this guy scored a try in all 3 games that he played. So for a hooker, that's a pretty good shift. We've got a lot of guys in this team, some flashy outside backs who were not able to match his try-scoring record His line-out throwing was at 85+% over the 3 games. His tackling rate was at 92%. And, yeah, like I said, scored a try in every game. So, if there's one bright spot of that French campaign, it's that he was doing some pretty solid work. For the bench, for the props, I've gone with Kian Healy and Kyle Sinclair. Both of these guys were really solid this November. Healy, again, is part of that very solid Irish front row, which really rolled over some of the opposing scrums. And Sinclair is really a guy with that all-round game. He was showing skills on the ground, skills with the ball, skills as his core role as a prop in scrummaging. So he had a very productive November as well. For backup hooker, it took me a while, but I have settled on Dylan Hartley. I know they need, with his age, they need to start divvying the experience around, but when he played, especially in that game against New Zealand, they dipped when he went off. The lineouts were starting to get a bit dominated by Brodie Retallick. It's obviously not all down to the hooker, but he was definitely a pretty good influence on the team when he was on. So I thought, yeah, he put in a pretty good effort for England, and he's going to be important for them going forward into the World Cup. Next, locks. From Wales, I've gone with Alan Wyn-Jones. It is Jones that's his surname, right? It's not Wyn-Jones. Jones is the surname. There's no double. Does Wales do double-barreled surnames? Or is it a double-barreled first name? I'm pretty sure it's double-barreled first name. But yeah, man, this guy, just the ultimate leader. 3 games. He doesn't take a backward step. You get in his face. This guy's not going to blink. Tough customer. Work rate all round. Averaged 12 tackles a game. Got turnover. At least one. One turnover. For a lock though. Not his specific role. Still in there. Getting his body where it's going to be sore. Averaged 10 runs per game. He just does a bit of everything. And there's not many people that get the better of him. I know he's getting up there in years as well, but he's still putting in a massive shift. He's got a pretty big ticker, that guy. So yeah, very solid effort. And another guy who's got a phenomenal work rate is James Ryan. What can you say about this guy? I mean, I looked at Alan Wyn-Jones' numbers. Admittedly, Ryan's got a bit more youthful energy on him, so his numbers in terms of averages are a bit higher. 16.5 average tackles per game, only over 2 games, so Alan Wyn did play the 3. 15 runs per game. The guy just does everything. The one thing I will say about these 2 guys is they don't really register on the line-out steals category. Like, it seems like that's not really their task in their teams. Like, there are other guys in their teams, perhaps not locks, who are the disruptive line-out forces rather than these guys. But it's just, as I was going through the numbers, that was an interesting thing to pick up on. Like in New Zealand, Brodie Retallick, who's a big name omission. I'm not saying that Brodie Retallick doesn't deserve to be among the best locks in the world, but I think he only played 3 games. One was off the bench against Italy, and in the Ireland game, James Ryan had a better game than Brodie Retallick. Brodie Retallick knocked the ball on a few times. He still made a lot of tackles, and Brodie was phenomenal against England. But I think over the course, I am giving it to these guys. Feel free to argue with me about that in the comments. That's the whole idea of the vids. This is just my team. I'm always interested to see your guys' teams. But yeah, both these guys, phenomenal work rates. James Ryan, for his age, is just a scary young player, man, to see how he's going to go. And he doesn't really know much about losing. He's not really been on a losing team, so mentally as well, that's as a player, it's a good place to be, that you expect to win when you run out on the field. Loose forwards, I have gone with Peter O'Mahony on the blind side. He's one guy whose stats in some areas don't do him justice. He doesn't have massive tackle stats like a guy like James Ryan, or even like CJ Stander and Josh van der Fleer had better tackle stats than him. I think Dan Levy had better stats when he played. But he has like those key moments where he gets line-out steals, and he is a man who gets line-out steals. He had a line-out steal against Argentina, which was crucial. Key turnovers, he averaged 2 turnovers per game. which is phenomenal. Again, only 2 games for him, but still 2 turnovers a game that's a heck of a stat. Like some guys might get 3 and then get none for a few weeks. No, 2 in each game that he played. Averaged 11 runs per game. Kind of a try-saving moment against the All Blacks in that game. Just when you need a key guy to give you a game-saving or game-winning play, he seems to be the man for the moment. Not that he's a guy who's going to brag about it and toot his own horn in interviews. He's just going to get on with it. But, yeah, man. Couldn't not have him in the team. On the open side, I've gone with Justin Tipuric from Wales. This guy does have phenomenal tackle stats. Over the 3 games he played, he averaged 15 tackles a game. I think one of the games was up to 20. He had 1 missed tackle in the 3 games, despite making all those tackles. He averaged a turnover and a half over the 3 games that he played. So again, almost like O'Mahony, almost up to 2. 2 line-out steals as well. So another guy who's like O'Mahony, able to disrupt the opposition line-out. And he didn't give away a single penalty over the 3 games. So man, that Welsh team has a whole lot of guys who can play in that back row. And yeah, Tipuric is among the best of them for sure. Now, I have done a little bit of a sneaky move here to include Ardie Savea kind of as my number 8, even though he pretty much played, I think, all the games as number 7. In an All Blacks team which, you know, kind of scraped past England. They beat Japan. I didn't really consider the Japan result for this one. And they lost to Ireland and then they beat Italy. So there wasn't really... Like, it wasn't a phenomenal tour, even though they only lost the 1 game for the All Blacks, really. Steve Hansen has said that they're changing up their tactics and things aren't quite right, and that seems to show. Some people will tell you they're foxing before the World Cup and not wanting to show off what they've got. We will see. But Ardie Savea was kind of one of the few guys who really, to me, seemed to kind of jump out. And with Sam Cane being injured, he tried to make a spot in the back row kind of his own rather than a bench spot, which is traditionally where he's been deployed from. He also had a turnover in every game of the 3 games he played. He averaged 10 tackles per game, and he only got 4 in the Italy game. He kind of went off after 40-odd minutes in the Italy game. He just seemed a bit slow. So the games where he got more tackles were against Ireland and against England. Perhaps New Zealand had less of the ball against the tougher teams. He had the most run meters of any New Zealand forward in that game against Ireland, and he was second for New Zealand forwards on run meters against England. So I think it was Tuipulotu who beat him against England, but he was putting up big numbers, as I said, and a lot of guys who looked a bit flat. Aaron Smith kind of didn't have his best year, really, but especially in November, it didn't go that well for him. A number of guys didn't look all that flash. Savea, I think, was one of them. So I'm putting him there at 8. It's a bit of a cheat, but hey, what are we going to do? For bench guys, I've gone with Johnny Gray from Scotland as my backup lock. So again, no Retallick. I know that's going to annoy a few people, but as I said, if I was looking at Rugby Championship, I think Brodie, except when he was injured, probably walks into it because he was in fantastic form. And on the England game, yes, but over the 3 games, perhaps not. But Johnny Gray he's underrated, man. He had very good numbers in all those kind of key departments, tackles. Again, not line-out steals. That doesn't seem to be his thing, but his line-out work with the ball. All his numbers are really good, and he is a top player. So I'm surprised he doesn't kind of get talked about a bit more than he does, but sometimes those players just seem to fly under the radar a bit. I'm sure not in Scotland. And another Scot, I've gone with Hamish Watson. His tackle stats were phenomenal, and his turnovers were also very, very good. He is unlucky not to be, and so many guys are unlucky not to be in the back row. The back row seems to be probably the most competitive area pretty much every time I do a dream team, because guys in the back row are just so busy with all the tackles they make, and they're expected to, to be physical carrying the ball. So, yeah, I've gone with Watson. Could have been any number of guys, but yeah, that is my forward pack, including subs. Now we get on to backs. Scrum half was a pretty tough one to pick. I have gone with Ben Youngs from England. He's another guy who his game is not all that flashy, but it's very effective for a number 9. One thing that was impressive, though, over the 3 games, he had 2 try assists, which is better than any other number 9, I'm pretty sure. I think Marmion maybe had 1 or 2. Marmion also played pretty well with those shoes that he was filling. But Young's, his kicking was really on point. Like, he's not always, but a lot of the time he's able to just drop that ball just outside the 22 when he puts those up and unders over. So it gives his guys time to chase, and the opposing team can't mark the ball, so he puts them under all kinds of pressure. His tackling stats were for the most part pretty good, although he did miss a couple against England and didn't have that much work to do against Australia. But yeah, I thought he was in a time when a lot of the scrum halves I didn't think there was one that was absolutely outstanding. A lot of guys were good. I thought he was probably a bit unsung, and to be fair, I don't think I picked him in any of my weekly dream teams as well, so kind of giving him a bit of belated credit. Next, number 10, fly half. I've gone with Handré Pollard. Again, this was a tough call because we've seen some interesting things from number 10s throughout this November. You've seen Sanchez miss a whole bunch of kicks for the Pumas, which was really surprising. Scotland have tried a couple of different guys. We've seen a bit of Joey Carberry as well for Ireland, which was always encouraging to see how he goes. Another man with some pretty big shoes to fill. Bowden Barrett kicking drop goals, so all kinds of crazy stuff. But I go on with Handré Pollard. He played 4 games. Over those 4 games, the Box scored 77 points. 46 of those were Handré Pollard. So he's a pretty important player for what the Box are doing at the minute. He sometimes, his distribution lacks a little bit, but for the most part, he's really good. He also had an average of 3.5 defenders beaten per game, which, I mean, given that he is able to slot into the number 12 jersey pretty easily, it shows in his running game from 10. He's a bit more physical than most number 10s that you'll find. I should say also that Farrell actually had really good numbers as well, but with the controversy over those tackles, I was kind of keeping Bargepole clear of that one, which is probably a bit of a cop-out, but there we go. For reserves, I've gone with Ambrose Papier from the Box. Young number 9, a lot of pressure on him with Faf de Klerk not playing in some of those games. And he, for the most part, stepped up pretty well. He's a quick guy. He runs the ball really well. When he can get quick ball, he's a dangerous guy in terms of getting quick ball for distribution or just running the ball, which we saw a bit of. He had some pretty good run meter stats compared to some of the other number 9s. So perhaps not the best guy, but in terms of the expectation levels and how he performed, I think he did an admirable job for quite a young guy. And also I picked Gareth Anscombe as my backup number 10. Yeah, he's like, I remember him when he played for the Blues. Like, he was frustrating to watch because he was so inconsistent and you never really knew which guy was going to turn up. But this year I've not really seen that from him. He seems to be a man in command. He knows what he's doing. Like, all I can really say about him this November is he missed a couple of kicks at touch. For the most part, he had a bunch of try assists, defensively solid. And just, yeah, got that backline really ticking for Wales. So, again, very encouraging if you're a Welsh fan, because it's another position. You got lots of depth with Bigger there as well, and Patchell on the wings too. So, heading into a World Cup, it's looking like pretty happy days. In the midfield, I've gone with Bundy Aki for number 12. It was a hard pick, because there was a few other guys there or thereabouts, but Aki in the big games really seemed to put in big performances. He did have 1 try. He had 1 try assist, averaged 32 meters a game with the ball, averaged 3 defenders beaten, which is good effort, averaged around 10 tackles. He did miss a few, but yeah, he just seems to have that all-round game pretty much settled. He's a dynamic ball runner. He's, for the most part, defensively sound, and he's able to distribute, which again was a kind of frustrating thing to watch him when he was back here in New Zealand. Sometimes he'd be screaming at him to pass at a key moment and he wouldn't do it, but he seems to be adapting his game or progressing his game under Joe Schmidt, and this time at Connacht, that he's improved from when he left New Zealand, that's for sure. Outside centre, I've gone with Jonathan Davis from Wales. Another guy who had a try. He averaged a few more run meters than Bundyaki. He averaged 47, but not so many tackles. He averaged 7 tackles a game, so it's still pretty solid. Again, missed a few, but for the most part, very consistent. 8 runs a game, so decent work rate. 2 defenders beaten average, and even got 2 turnovers. So he was doing a little bit of everything. He is another guy who just seems to be a fairly kind of complete package player. Like, there are some guys that you look at them and you think, like, I mean, Dale Ende for the box is really frustrating at times. I mean, he can bust tackles like a lot of guys just don't have that natural ability to, but then he knocks the ball on at the most frustrating times. But Aki and Davis at the moment seem very, very consistent, and that's, as a fan, less likely to make you throw the shoe at the TV because, yeah, you know what you're going to get, and it's, for the most part, pretty good service. Outside backs. I could not put Jacob Stockdale on here. 3 games, averaged 71 meters a game, scored only the 1 try, but it was against the All Blacks, and it was a Joe Schmidt, from what I've seen of the analysis, it was a Joe Schmidt power play. I think it was the 10-14 that called it that. And he executed it. Like, it's one thing to tell a guy to do it, but that execution was next level. He averaged 4 defenders beaten per game. Amazing that he didn't score against Italy. But I think that was Lama that got all the tries that day. But still, yeah, Stockdale, numbers very good. Player very talented. So, hence this thing. My fullback, I've gone with Israel Folau. He's my only Wallaby on here. He actually averaged more meters than Stockdale. He averaged 73 meters over 3 games. He got 2 tries, both of them against England, in an effort where the Wallabies were looking really poor. He was one of the kind of few bright lights in that game. He had a 100% tackle rate, which is exceptional for a guy who's in the outside backs because they're usually in positions where they're going to get beaten at some point. Even got 2 turnovers. So, yeah, again, going into World Cup, if Michael Cheika needs someone to fire, Folau is one of those strike weapons that a lot of teams just, you can't replicate Israel Folau with his aerial ability and some of those lines that he runs. Lastly, Sean Maitland. I'm sure I'm going to get a bit of grief about picking Sean Maitland, but he had 2 tries, which again is more than Stockdale, though it's not all about tries. Tries can just be a finishing move, which one of Maitland's was. But he had a clean break in every single game. He had 100% tackle rate, except against South Africa when I think it was 0. I think he missed like 2 or 3 out of 3 or whatever it was. But yeah, over 3 games, he was always there running support lines, showing enough gas, even though somebody told me he's not that quick enough to get a job done. And yeah, I thought he was just all around having a good thing. Tommy Seymour as well for Scotland had 1 really big game, but I checked out his numbers and they weren't as consistent. But Maitland, overall, those games seemed to have pretty steady numbers in all 3 that he played. And last guy on the bench, I've gone with Mojano from the Pumas. He's another guy who, I mean, I'm a big fan of Boffelli and a big fan of Delguy. But Mojano, those lines that he runs, and he's got versatility in the positions that he can play, but he runs amazing lines. He's got really good gas. I think he scored at least 1 try over November. If you count the Barbars one, I think he scored another one from memory. Too much rugby recently, but I would have said before November that Boffelli was probably my favourite Argentinian player, and he might still be there, but Mojano is definitely closing the gap, because a lot of stuff that he touches turns to gold, or it's something that he does that's a bit of magic that puts the team on the front foot to then go ahead and score. So it's a pity the team couldn't get better results, but he was definitely one of the outstanding players from November. So yeah, that's my 23. As always, it is definitely not the correct 23. It's just my 23. I have been pretty hard on the All Blacks. As I said, I'm not trying to say that none of the All Blacks are better than some of these players. But I thought in November a lot of the All Blacks guys were a bit quiet. The Wallabies didn't have their best November. The Springboks were a bit hot and cold. But I mean, you had pretty consistently good Novembers from Ireland, from Wales, Scotland. They'd look back at that South Africa game and wish they could have done a bit better. South Africa would look back at the England game and wish they could have done a bit better. So England, I should mention as well, were also, I think, better than people perhaps expected they were going to be. So there was a lot of good rugby played. France losing to Fiji. It was all very entertaining stuff. But that's my team for November. You guys let me know your thoughts on who you would have had in there instead of some of these guys. As I said, some of the positions are pretty competitive. And also, I did spend a lot of time looking through the numbers. So, yeah, those perhaps have muddled my brain. But, yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.